Welcome to the Oyster Aero PearlCast, where we sit down with founders and leaders shaping the aviation industry, from freshly formed startups to the biggest names in the sky. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Turbo Resources in Phoenix, Arizona, now operating in 450,000 square feet of state-of-the-art warehouse space. Turbo continues to keep the aviation industry flying and is actively buying material.
Hello, everybody. Jeff Yergi, founder of Oyster Aero and the Oyster Aero PearlCast here. And we only interview founders of aviation companies, and we did some soul searching. And probably one of the most serial entrepreneurs and successful founders is David Neeleman. So welcome, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I guess I count maybe 7-8 ventures. I think you get credited with about 5 airlines, most recently Breeze, but there's been some other things. When did the aviation bug hit you? Like, was it when you were a kid, or did it hit a little later in life?
Well, my the PR department at JetBlue went to my parents and said, "Hey, have you got any pictures of David as a kid?" And they found one with a big airplane on my cake when I was probably 4 years old, so or maybe 3 years old. That's when it started, when you had that airplane on your cake. Recently, my dad passed away last August, and
Right.
one of my favorite things to do is to read his journals to my mom, who's still with us. And I read about my first airplane flight, and I was born in Brazil. I was 10 months old, and we flew on a Super Constellation, Super Connie, from Sao Paulo to Rio, delayed, to Brasilia, to Manaus, to Bogota, to Panama City, to Mexico City, and finally landed into LAX. So that was my airplane flight. So it's a good thing I didn't remember that one. I probably would have never gotten into aviation. So I don't know. I was in college, and I don't know. I just started getting obsessed with Southwest Airlines, and I thought they were the most amazing thing ever. And so I just read everything I could get my hands on, and started I had my own little travel company, and that failed when Hawaii Express went out of business. And I just ended up doing our own charters, and had the dream actually of, starting Morris Air, patterned after Southwest Airlines, so much so that Southwest came and bought us. So and then I got a chance to work with Herb for a short period of time. So that was, that's what got me into the business.
Sure. So when you started more, I mean, like, I started a channel partner website, right? So it's fun, but I can't imagine taking the decision to start an airline. I mean, when you look at all the approvals, the capital, all the logistics and everything, was that daunting? Like, did that scare you, or did you just jump in and say, go for it?
Well, at that time, we were basically doing the easy way. We were just chartering airplanes.
Right.
So I would call up and charter airplanes, and we were doing scheduled charters, and we were doing operator participant contracts, much like actually JSX is doing today.
Right.
Kind of to conform to the Part 135 rules. So we were doing that, and then Steve Hazy offered to lease us airplanes directly, airplanes that he had taken out of America West, and he said, "You have to become legitimate. You can't keep doing this," because there were complaints being filed against us with the DOT. And so he referred us to just this great guy, Eustace Schultz, and he had worked for the FAA, had been in World War II. He was an amazing person. And so Eustace helped us certify the airline. And so we became a certified airline. Of course, a lot of people objected, like Alaska Airlines, other people, to us becoming an airline, but we got that approved, and then we went for a short period of time after we were approved. Invented ticketless travel. We were the first airline to ever do that, and then Southwest Airlines came along and purchased us in late '93, and I was at Southwest for about 6 months after they purchased us. So it was a good experience.
Good, good. So 6 months, and then when you left, now I met you and heard your story a little bit down in Daytona at Embry-Riddle about 25 years ago. I think you had a non-compete, so you said, "Hey, I can take operations to Canada." Is that kind of how it worked out?
Yeah, kind of a funny story about the non-compete. I haven't really repeated the story too much because waited till Herb and Jim Parker um, went on to greater glory. But
Sure.
after I signed the non-compete, because Herb kind of led me to believe I was going to be at Southwest Airlines, and I was there for, like I said, about 6 months. But I ruffled so many feathers. I got there. I got them to put heads-up display in the airplane because they weren't using all the equipment. I got them to make Sunday a peak day instead of an off-peak day, which is crazy when you think about it. I integrated Morris into Southwest Airlines a lot quicker than they had wanted to. But got e-ticket travel. We basically got them exported, all of our people down there, and got them to be recognizing the Smithsonian as the first airline to ever have e-ticket travel. So then Herb said, "Great job, you did all this stuff, but you should have taken 3 years. You took 6 months, and you made everybody mad." So, about that time, the Justice Department, after Herb kind of let me go, I was asked to go speak to the Justice Department about um, just the merger and all that. And so I went back there, and Jim Parker, who at that time was the general counsel, he accompanied me there. So he's sitting in the same room with the Justice Department, and they said, "Okay, David, now you're out of Southwest Airlines. What are you going to do? Are you going to be back in the industry?" And I said, "Someday, but right now I can't because I have this non-compete." And they said, "Well, how long's your non-compete?" And I said, 5 years. And they said, 5 years? And they looked over at Jim Parker, and he kind of waved them off like this and said, "Oh, we know it's not enforceable." So, so I went back and called her, but I go, "What the heck, man? You know it's not enforceable." He goes, "Oh, yes, it is. Jim didn't know what he's talking about, and I will sue you. You're the last person I ever want to see in the airline business." So I just, I didn't want to cause trouble, so I signed
Sure.
it. So said, yeah, that's when I went to WestJet and helped found WestJet with, Mark Hill and Clive Beto and those guys. So, and Don Bell, Tim Morgan. So, yeah, that was, I bided my time. And then also during that time, my partner, Dave Evans, and I founded what became Navitaire. And
Yep.
that's probably one of the biggest impacts on the low fare business was Navitaire. Got 65 airline customers. The company was purchased by Amadeus for close to $1 billion. So
Wow.
that's what I did during my non-compete period, was started Navitaire. It was called Open Skies at the time.
Yep.
And
And
then
okay,
also
WestJet.
did WestJet.
Well, that'll keep you busy. And then let's see, when I met you, you would come down and kind of talk to us about this new airline, JetBlue. And a couple things I remember that really stood out is one, Kennedy had nothing going on in the daytime. So that was part of the decision of going there.
Yeah.
Live TV, leather seats, low fares. So I think, when you look back in history of the startups, when you start an airline, the old model is buy some junky airplanes or charter some stuff and just try to get passengers moving until you can upgrade things. And what I remember is your set out for JetBlue was to immediately upgrade the passenger experience at lower fares. So
Absolutely.
that was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah. So the industry was terrible at that time. I mean, what you see today does not resemble what we had then.
I remember,
As
yeah.
far as competition. I mean, it was absolutely terrible. And I had this experience that made me convinced I needed leather seats, where I was on a flight and I sat in some urine. Somebody had, and then it was the only seat left on the airplane. They told me, "Sit in the urine for the flight. We'll give you a blanket to sit on, or just get off the airplane." So I said, "I'm going with leather seats." And so, um, it's John Owen, who was the treasurer at Southwest Airlines, and he had purchased and probably more Boeing airplanes than any airline, any person in the history of of aviation at Southwest. So I sat down with him. I was there 6 months, and even though it was a short period of time, I absorbed a lot of stuff. And he kind of showed me, put pen to pencil, and showed me that it was actually cheaper to buy a new airplane than it was to have a used one.
Sure.
And that, and engine overhauls didn't cost $11 million back then. So
right.
it's even more the case now. So I said, why don't you come work for us? And he said, okay. So I hired him to be our CFO, and it was all new airplanes from the very beginning because we knew what they cost. We knew what, you had the maintenance holiday and reliability and all that stuff. It was just the way to go. So that was for that type of operation, high frequency, high utilization, we had to have new airplanes. And I can remember being over at the Airbus factory and looking at this brand new airplane with leather seats and new plane smell, and the TVs came a few months later, but it just blew away everybody, really. And I think some of the struggles that JetBlue's having today, and I was in the audience when one of the majors was giving a speech, and they said, the reason we have live TV today, the reason we have free Wi-Fi, the reason we have leather seats is because that guy's sitting down in the audience. So, there was a lot of copying that went on from what JetBlue had, and JetBlue, the products today are more similar to JetBlue, and in a lot of cases because they have first class. Now JetBlue is getting first class, is behind, has surpassed it, and so. It's set a standard and that everybody followed for the last 25 years.
The other day where Scott Kirby basically gave you a lot of credit for coming out now.
Well, Scott Kirby in that interview, he gives a lot of them, but the one he said, he was talking about Spirit, obviously in the ULCCs, and he said, contrasted them with JetBlue, who started out with the notion that with the customer in mind.
Yeah.
You wanted to create a great experience for the customer. So yeah, that was absolutely the case. Our motto was we were a customer service company that just happens to fly airplanes, and that was our mantra from the very beginning.
Sure. Another thing that's kind of struck me, and maybe this is more of a founder thing than just like a traditional like MBA CEO thing. You seem happiest when you're walking the aisles, handing out snacks, throwing bags. It's not a photo op, you know what I mean? And it feels like when you're out with the users of the product, with the customers, that struck me back then. And I think I've seen that, as you started other airlines and probably the ones before that. But I would imagine, is that kind of a big part of your success, is that you try to keep a handle on the very front lines?
Certainly has been from the very beginning. It's a little more difficult with Breeze because we're headquartered in Salt Lake.
Sure.
It was easy when I was at JetBlue because I lived in Connecticut. Our headquarters were 15 minutes from JFK. I could go out there anytime and throw bags, and they were actually JetBlue people. Everybody from the ground up were JetBlue technicians, ramp guys, put a basketball hoop out there, played hoops with them, got in the belly of the airplane. That was easier. And today, we just announced our 78th city, and we're spread from basically Pasco, Washington to Fort Lauderdale to Bangor, Maine to San Diego. So we're all over the place, and they're not. They're valuable business partners of ours, but they're not Breeze, employees. And I could fly to Lancaster or wherever. I could go up to Erie, Pennsylvania, and I would maybe see a crew going by. So I've used technology to make a difference in that. So how I do the touch points now is I have a weekly call with our pilots every single Tuesday at noon. There's a weekly call with our flight attendants, which I participate in from time to time. I have a every other week call with our technicians, which I'm always participating with. I have a every other week a catch-all team member call had one yesterday. So if you add up all the people that participate, we have about 2,500 people, either live or recording. We touch about 1,500 to 1,800 people every week. And so that's how, and then get them in the huddle, talk about our business, talk about the industry, talk about what we need to do better, talk about all of our successes, and of course, what we need to do better. So talk about how we want to be on the road to perfection, even though we'll never get there, we get better along the way. So those are really important messages that, but technology has enabled me to kind of virtually be there with everybody all the time.
Sure. So you're still Connecticut or East Coast based, and then this airline is out of Salt Lake, obviously. So
No, I'm actually in Salt Lake.
okay,
I live in Deer Valley. So,
got
I
it.
live in Utah.
Got it. So I guess I want to talk about Breeze a little bit, but I have one more question around the airlines. Is kind of each airline the same playbook? Like, would you say Azul and WestJet and JetBlue is kind of like, the same model, or are there different intricacies that you have to consider for each one?
I mean, there's elements, right? There's
Yeah.
elements that are similar, but I learn along the way.
Yep.
And one of the what's really important, and this is top of the pyramid, is that you have to have there has to be an opportunity.
Yep.
I don't. It's too hard to start an airline, anyways. To do it just for the sake of doing it and say you did it is not in my rule book. There has to be a a reason for being, a raison d'être. And one of the reasons I sold Morris Air is that we were sitting in Delta's hub, and we were, was looking at the revenue one day, and kind of an old warhorse came in and looked at these things, and he said, "You're so susceptible because all Delta has to do is match your fares, and it'll be revenue positive for them, and you'll be out of business." So I sold to Southwest because of that. So then, JetBlue Kennedy was wide open.
Yep.
And it was really tough and we had a better product than everybody else. I always have this thing that too much overkill is never enough. It's not just enough to be in Kennedy. You need to be the best product. You need to have the best customer service, and you have to stack those things on top of each other. Azul, WestJet, Western Pacific had just gone out of business, and it was basically Air Canada in the whole dang country, and they weren't strong in the West. So replacing them. JetBlue, we talked about JFK was available. Azul, you basically had two airlines doing the exact same thing.
Yep.
There were literally 100 cities that weren't being served when we got there that we're serving today. 100 different cities. And their kind of inability or unwillingness to kind of move off of one aircraft type. They just said, we're going to do this with one aircraft type. And we said, great, we'll go do the rest of the 100 cities, and we'll get Caravans, we'll get ATRs, we'll get Embraer 195s, and then we'll move up the scale and get the 321s and the 330s. So, and then Breeze, there were 125 communities that lost more than 25% of their air service. As the costs had gone up and up and up in the U.S., there had been a retrenchment to the hubs, and then coupled that with pilot salary increases that made 50-seaters obsolete pretty much, and regional jets very expensive to operate. And so there was a kind of a room for a 137 seat opportunity, but it wasn't just a 137. And we don't have TVs because I don't think TVs are that important anymore.
Right.
I think it's kind of interesting that Delta and United do. But Wi-Fi is important, really, really important. So we went with the high-speed Wi-Fi integrated into our bundles. And then we have a size of airplane with a luxury, with a high-end product. And, as I think back on it, my experience, the airplane was very conducive to first class. Had we not bought that airplane, I don't think we would have gone with first class. But the fact is, you lose about 50% of the seats in the first class section, and you can charge twice as much. So it's just math. That makes a lot of sense. And we can go from 12 to 16 to 24 seats. And we started out with more, we have less, now we're going to go to more. So, those are options that we have, and we can do that on overnight, basically. But we said, okay, we want to fit this niche somewhere between 174 seats and 160 to 180 seats. We want to be at 137, and we want to have 45 extra legroom seats. We want to have 12 to 16 to 20 to 24 first class seats. And then we want to fly between cities that don't have nonstop service. And that's about 87% of the time we can do that.
Yep.
And which is very sustainable.
That's wonderful. So
It's all exit costs, right? CMOL costs. You can say, well, what about your CMOL costs? Well, the ULCC style. Well, let's go jam 240 seats into 321. Only get 321s, and nobody can compete with us on CMOL costs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all United and those guys had to do is go bigger, take the incremental seats, and they had, for the 20 or 30 extra seats they had on going from a 320 to a 321, they had them for a lower price than what the ULCCs had it for. So all they had to do is match them on those seats with frequency, with frequent flyer, and all the stuff that they have. And it was kind of no question who people would choose.
Wow. And then the fleet, obviously Embraer and A220. So the A220 should serve well, right?
Yeah. I mean, the 220s got the engine issues. So,
Yep.
we're very innovative. We went and we picked up 8 Egypt airplanes that, as part of the deal, and we have them kind of scattered around our system. We use the engines. Knock on wood, we don't have a single airplane that's parked
Okay.
because we have the spares between what we own and what we will finally be getting on all the Egypt Airs. We have 26 spare engines for a fleet of 40 airplanes. So you kind of need all that just to keep from having planes be parked.
Very cool. I'm in the supply chain side, and I've always heard that like maintenance is kind of like the third cost in an airline. You've got crew and fuel. So where is that kind of still true these days, or is that kind of fluctuate depending on what kind of model you have?
Well, for the first time, maintenance has surpassed the ownership of the airplane. So,
Right.
So yeah, it's moved into number 3. So we have to figure out how to do it differently.
Yep.
And we have to, one of the things we do down in Brazil is we have 2 PC-12s, and the PC-12s kind of fly during the night and day, and they're delivering crews and technicians and parts throughout the country. So we're going to mimic something similar at Breeze to make sure we have aircraft availability to minimize the number of operational spares. We have 2 operational spares today, plus we have the E-Jet fleet. Thank goodness we have that. Very reliable, great airplane. Those will be phased out by the end of next year, but we have time to kind of build a redundant operation with recovery options. And, we're working really closely. There are parts on this airplane that that don't go as long as they should go.
Right.
They need to be re-engineered. So there's about 10 parts that that should be on wing for 2,000 hours or 4,000 hours, and they're at 800. So
Right.
and so I think AI and predictive maintenance we've always done, but I think AI is going to play a lot greater role. We have so much data that comes from the airplane every day.
Mm-hmm.
We are really focused on downloading all that data and preemptively fixing things or replacing things before, based on history. And it's easy to do it kind of on a very top level, but I think we can get a lot more in depth and a lot more effective.
Very cool. Yeah, that was one of the questions about AI. So Breeze is now about 4 years old, I think, and you guys just announced some westbound. Do you have a favorite city like that you've or a region that you've launched into recently, or are they just all kind of near and dear?
They're all good.
Yeah.
It's the maturity curve is real, because
Yep.
when you start in a market, nobody knows who you are.
Yep.
You don't have any repeat business, and as you build that business, as you Ryanair, I love the story of Ryanair. I'm trying to think of the name, the secondary city from Toulouse. We were just down there. My wife was out there visiting while I was at Airbus. So they start flying down there, and everyone's like, why wouldn't you go to there in France? And all these British people flew down there, and they were looking at these French country cottages and saying, holy crap, I can own a French country cottage for 60,000 quid or whatever. And so
Yep.
they went down and snarfed them all up, and they created a business where people can go back and forth to their French country cottages. So, I think I've always thought there's a realist, certainly we first need to do cruises and packages, and we haven't gotten into that yet as much as we should have.
Yep.
Now we're going to get our international approvals here, hopefully pretty soon. And once we do that, we're going to get more into packaging business. But then, maybe there's a real estate play as well, where we can market real estate to some of the routes we fly. We serve 11 cities in Florida. It's crazy. And so, and the Florida real estate's kind of down now. So you may tie those two together, just like the Ryanair did.
Yeah, I mean, in the 80s, I remember airlines kind of branched out into resorts and stuff like that. So maybe that can have a comeback now. So
yeah, I mean, it's not like we're not going to go spend 800 million on a resort that we sell for 200
yeah,
million, like Allegiant. But at least we can promote what's out there.
very cool. I guess the other thing that has kind of I've wondered about, and you've talked about having ADHD and being, a little quirky. I think that's a trait that helps you see things maybe that other people don't see. Is that kind of, what's your perspective on that now after 7, 8 companies?
Yeah, it's a two-edged sword, right?
Yep.
You need to surround yourself with people that complement what you do, what you're good at. So yeah, I think I have an ability to see around corners, but then I'll also have people to say, well, wait a second, there's thing about my brand of ADD that I think frustrates people sometimes is that I simplify everything. I'll take
Yep.
a very complex issue and I'll say, why is this so complex? Why don't we just do this, this, and this? And they'll say, well, it's not that simple. I go, prove it to me. So for me, it's all about facts and data. Bring me the data. Show me we can do it. And if we can do it, now obviously safety is top of the pyramid. And
Sure.
I'm a radical safety guy. That's my area of hyper focus. But beneath that, it's kind of like, how can we do this more efficiently? How do we do this better? How do we? Why is the industry always done it this way? And um, I know in Europe people have chase planes that go behind their planes with parts and technicians. Why don't we do it here? So
Yep.
we've proven, and we had one airplane, one of our PC-12s in May. It's the last time I looked at the numbers. One was in the shop and one was available, and we had 61 flights in 1 month and kind of rescue operations. So, planes are reliable, but still they break up. They have 98.5 dispatch reliability. And when you have 250 flights a day, which we're kind of getting up to like 227, you're going to have a broken airplane every day somewhere. So it's
Yep.
just the way the
Yep.
numbers work.
All right. Two last questions for you. I live in Memphis, and hopefully you can see my screen there. Last
Yeah.
month we lost Fred Smith, and I guess I was just curious, what was he like? I never met him, obviously. Is there anything from him that's kind of shaped you over the years?
Oh man, what a treasure that guy was. He was, when I was a young CEO at JetBlue, he was on at the time it was the ATA, now A4A board. And when he'd walk in the room and he would sit down and open his mouth, we were just like, I would just sit at his feet and listen. And everybody knew he swung a big bat in Washington, and nobody questioned anything he said. He was so in tune with everything in Washington. Then fast forward, for the past 10 years, I've owned a home in the neighborhood where he has a home here in
Mm-hmm.
Utah. And we became very close. I get choked up when I think about him. He was, every single time he would come to town, he would call me up and say, "Hey, I'm in town. Let's come on up and let's chat." And we had so many memorable times together. Um, kind of the last time, um, one of the last times I was with him, that where that picture was taken, I
Yep.
was speaking at a Goldman Sachs conference, and I looked on the agenda, and he was speaking, and I called him up. I said, "You're speaking right before me at this conference in Napa," and he said, and had booked a flight. My wife and I were going to fly to San Francisco and get a car and go 2 hours north. And he said, "I'm gonna pick you up." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, I'm stopped by your house, pick you up, and we're going to fly out of Heber, and go right into Santa Rosa. And so we had that flight, and that was where that picture was taken. But it's just, as he would talk about his experience in Vietnam, and he'd talk about uh, the speeches he gave, and just the policy, he spent an hour with President Trump, a couple months before he died. Everybody called on Fred Smith. He was a treasure, a national treasure. And when I found out he died, I was so sad. I mean, I was just like, it's like I would never hear him call me and say, um, "Hey, come on up. I'm in town, and bring that sweet wife of yours." He always loved my wife to come up
Yep.
too. So, yeah, meet his children, wife, just what a great man. I miss him so much.
Yeah, he seemed like a really, really phenomenal individual, and obviously successful, but then in his personal life. And then, speaking about personal life, I mean, in the middle of all these companies and aviation things you've done over the years, you've got a couple of kids and grandkids, I'd imagine.
I do. I've just my 36th grandkid will be born any day now. So yeah,
Oh,
we've got,
wow.
my kids are doing the job and making it happen. Fred had 10 kids, and so we always talked about that together. It was, family was certainly top for him. I'd heard when he passed away, he spent the whole day with his family in the family compound by the
Yeah,
pool. Then he had some kind of tightness in the chest, and said, "I'll be right back, guys. I just got to run to the hospital." And then he died on the way to the hospital. So that was his last thing that he spent time with his family, and that's the way I want to go as
that's
well.
cool.
So
Yeah. Do you have time for that these days? I mean, are you able to
of
kind of
course,
balance things pretty good?
oh,
Yeah,
absolutely, I always have. I
good
always have
deal.
time for my kids and my grandkids, and in this house we ski and ski out, and I buy 26 season passes every year for all my grandkids, and they're here all winter skiing,
Oh,
and
nice, nice.
summers they come here. So yeah, no, we have lots of time together.
Good deal. Yeah,
We have a lake down below, and we have a boat there, and they spend summers on the boat and winters skiing.
That's neat. I will say probably one of the most rewarding things about not being in corporate is, my oldest is getting ready to go to UT Knox and for the first time. And so we're spending the last couple of weeks just hanging out with him and, get the time to do it. So it's a lot of fun. So,
Yeah, that's awesome.
all right, David, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's a little different format than probably a lot of the other podcasts that you've done, but I really, really appreciate the opportunity for you to hang out with us for a little bit.
Thank you. I appreciated talking to you, and best of luck on your business.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.